You're listening to the Homeownership podcast by Movementum Realty, real estate talk for buying, selling, and owning property.
Hey guys, Sean Patrick Queally here, broker owner of Movementum Realty, located in Hanover, Massachusetts. Welcome to episode 11, Buying and Selling a Home with a VA Loan. I'm your host, Sean Patrick Queally. I'm here today with Patrick Queally of Hancock Mortgage Professionals out of Rockland, Massachusetts.
How are you? Nice to see you today.
I'm doing well, Patrick. Thanks for coming in. I hear that you guys are the experts at VA loans. I've seen your videos on Facebook. I believe it's called Military Mortgage Boot Camp.
Correct. Military Mortgage Boot Camp. So we're a group of a couple of hundred loan officers across the country, and we have the mission of serving those that have served. So all of us are very passionate about helping veterans with their home loans. Some of the people in the Military Mortgage Boot Camp are actually veterans themselves. So for someone like me who's a civilian, being passionate about helping veterans, it's just an additional resource to, reach into and talk to another mortgage professional who is also a veteran to try and do just the best thing for our veterans. And again, it's, all going towards helping serve those who have served us.
Could you just tell me real quick a little bit more about Hancock Mortgage and what they are?
Sure. So Hancock Mortgage Partners, we are not exactly national. I think we're licensed in 38 or 39 states right now, but we're a mortgage banker, meaning we originate, process, underwrite, and close and fund the vast majority of our transactions, which means from start to finish, everything is in-house under the roof of Hancock Mortgage Partners. You're not dealing with multiple different companies and underwriting that's being done someplace else. Everything happens under the umbrella of Hancock Mortgage.
Excellent. So let's start it off with the most important question. What is a VA loan and what does VA stand for?
So the VA is the Veterans Administration. A VA loan is a loan product that certain classes of people are eligible for. So, that class of individual, as you can probably imagine, is a veteran, okay? So to be eligible for a VA loan, there are a couple of different pieces of criteria. So that individual has to have served at least 90 consecutive days during wartime, or they would have to have served 181 days consecutively during peacetime. Or if they're in the reserves or the National Guard, they need to have 6 years of service. Now, one of the other pieces of the puzzle here that most people are not aware of who else is eligible, the unremarried surviving spouse of a veteran may be eligible for a VA home loan as well.
Wow, that's impressive. I didn't know that one. I'm glad that you brought that up to me because I can imagine that there's quite a few widowed spouses out there that are not aware that they have the availability of the VA loan and be able to use the eligibility for themselves.
Absolutely. I've come across a few of those myself and in my career, and without exception, every single one of them were surprised. So one of the important questions that I always ask when I'm meeting with a client, I ask if they're a veteran or if they are the surviving spouse of a veteran.
Excellent. So what would you say for a consumer going to purchase a home? What is the main benefits to using a VA loan?
Well, a VA loan has a number of benefits. Probably one of the most commonly known is that a VA loan allows that veteran to purchase a home with no down payment. So they can obtain 100% financing. That's probably one of the biggest benefits. But in addition to that, there's no PMI, private mortgage insurance. With other loan products, anytime you're putting less than 20% down, PMI, private mortgage insurance, is part of the equation. But with a VA loan, there is no PMI that's required. So again, it's 100% financing, and there's no PMI, which certainly helps with what that overall payment is going to be at the end of the day.
So where this podcast is gauged towards buyers and sellers as well as homeowners, what would you say the sellers should better understand about VA loans? I know a lot of people are getting multiple offers and they're looking at loans and they're really unfamiliar with loans, so they're trying to compare products. What would you give them for advice here?
Yeah, so one of the things that comes up quite frequently is the idea or the perception that simply because that offer is coming in and it's 100% financing, many home sellers as well as real estate agents are going to believe, well, that must be a weak buyer. They don't have any money for a down payment. They're financing 100% of the value of the home, and they, just disregard that offer as being weak. And really nothing could be further from the truth. So the national statistics show us that a veteran home buyer is actually much more well qualified than their civilian counterparts. On average, a veteran has a higher credit score, they earn a higher income, and they actually do have funds available for a down payment. But because of their service to our country, they are eligible to be able to purchase a home with financing terms that us civilians could just dream about. They could purchase a home with no down payment required. So I really think it's a large disservice to our country, and especially to our veterans, when a home seller simply disregards that offer as being weak because it comes at 100% financing. And I think it's up to us as the real estate and financing professionals to educate that home seller, because that seller, that consumer, probably isn't aware of what a VA home loan really is and what it can do for that veteran. So again, I think it's really up to us as the real estate industry professionals to educate our home sellers on why they should strongly consider accepting a VA loan, and offering a home that is coming with a VA loan.
Yeah, I think you bring up an important point there, because I think there's some wrongful discrimination against these buyers. And at the end of the day, just like you said, they're almost better qualified than others a lot of times, and they serve the country, and they made it so you could be there as a home seller. You're sitting there on a single family piece of property or a condo property that you have the safety and everything and the right to enjoyment of only because of their service, and then to turn your back on them because the offer uses the word VA at the top, nothing else different. It doesn't really make much sense. So I'd love for sellers to...
Yeah, that veteran, basically signed a blank check to the U.S. government and to the citizens of the U.S. when they signed their enlistment papers. And, part of repaying them for their service is the terms of this, financing for the American dream, for owning their own home. And it really does upset me when I see a offer not get accepted because it's coming with VA financing at 100%, and the seller's just incorrect assumption that means it's a weak buyer.
Right. And so one of the other things that happens with these is sellers seem to be a little confused, as well as the buyers, on what can be paid for by the buyer on a VA loan. And so we have the one known, obviously, is the pest inspection must be paid for. And it used to be the misconception, I believe it's a misconception, of that it must be paid for by the seller, which is not true from what I hear. And can you tell me a little more about that?
Yeah, so that, a long, long time ago, that was accurate, but now it is not. So the seller does not need to pay for the termite inspection across the board. So there are fees, with any mortgage transaction. There are fees that are associated with, and the VA has a list of what is allowable and what is unallowable fees. So one of the terms of the financing is origination costs. So a consumer, and a veteran being part of that, a home buyer, can pay origination charges. However, if a lender is charging those origination charges, there are certain fees that the veteran cannot pay for out of their own pocket. So in other words, if as a lender you're charging that veteran buyer 1% of the amount being financed as an origination charge, that pretty much wipes out a lot of other fees that a veteran can pay for. So the community of mortgage lenders that support the veterans and are very in tune with the VA home loan guidelines, myself included, we don't charge origination fees. Okay, so without that origination fee being part of the transaction, the veteran certainly can, and in most cases will, pay for that pest inspection, for that termite report.
So the next thing I wanted to ask you, Patrick, was how much out-of-pocket money does the VA require, including a closing cost estimate? Obviously, it's always different depending on the client, but just a generalization of what is the type of money we're looking at?
Well, actually, the VA doesn't require anything out of pocket. So a veteran legitimately can walk into a home and not reach into their pocket for one penny if the transaction is structured appropriately. Typically, the way that works is they're getting 100% financing, so there's no down payment required. Like with any mortgage transaction, there are settlement charges, there are closing costs and escrows and prepaids, which do need to be paid and accounted for. So how does that get paid for and the veteran doesn't reach into their pocket? Well, a lot of lenders will issue a lender credit, so the lender will cover some of those charges. And as a real estate agent, I'm sure you know, it's pretty common in the marketplace that a buyer will make an offer on a home requesting some seller-paid closing costs. So if the seller-paid closing costs and the lender costs are sufficient to cover all the closing costs and escrows and prepaids, and it's 100% financing, that veteran can walk into that home legitimately with zero out of pocket.
Wow, that's amazing. That's an unbelievable product. I'm glad that we talked about that because we do often use sellers' concessions for closing costs and prepaids. It's pretty standard. Sometimes it means when writing the offer, we have to write the offer for a little higher money in order to offer the same amount that we were originally planning on offering. But there's no reason we couldn't do that and roll it into the financing. And sometimes on different properties that aren't as hot or haven't been on the market only for a day and multiple offer, we may be able to actually use it as sort of a price break and ask for those closing costs and prepaids.
Yeah, at the end of the day, you know, the seller nets the same bottom line, but it may be somewhat like a psychological benefit that offers coming in a little bit higher, even though they're contributing some money back towards the settlement charges. Works out to be kind of a psychological, you know, the seller thinks that it's a better offer simply because it's coming at a higher price tag.
So for a veteran, if they're going to purchase a home, is there any benefit to putting money down versus no money down on the VA loan?
Well, I mean, yes and no. So, you know, no down payment is required, but obviously if a veteran is giving a down payment, that means that they're borrowing less dollars, which means that their monthly mortgage payment is going to be a little bit lower. Many veterans, so even though 100% financing is possible, there are many veterans that still do give a down payment, whether it be their own, you know, financial, you know, sense of wanting to contribute towards this transaction, even though they're not required to. And some, it's, again, just simply to manage that monthly budget, to make that monthly payment a little bit more affordable for them by giving a down payment.
Okay, I can understand that. Obviously, the more down payment you have, the more that your actual payment monthly will go down because you're financing less overall. So clearly it makes sense in that aspect. And then with the benefit of zero money down, sometimes you can almost use it as your own home equity line of credit where you have cash and capital sitting in your bank account for improvements and maybe new furniture when you move in. So obviously, based on a person's own situation, they need to make those decisions for what works best for their budget.
Yeah, and we take a look at the whole financial picture. So it's not just, okay, this is the rate and this is the payment. We take a bigger picture approach, not exactly like a financial planner, but a little bit of that sort of an aspect, you know, because even though it's 100% financing, I never want a veteran or really any buyer to get to the closing table and sort of be shaking out the couch cushions. You know, I don't want everybody to be all in at the closing table. I want them to have some cash to fall back on because the reality of it is when you own a home, there are expenses and it's different than renting and you're in charge and you have to take care of the maintenance of the home as well. So you want to make sure that, you know, that buyer has a couple of bucks to fall back on just for whatever financial issue that comes up.
That's a good point. That's something I'm always advising buyers on is just because you can afford it doesn't mean you need it. And
exactly.
Just because you can afford it today doesn't mean you want to be sitting on an inflatable couch eating ramen noodles and talking about vacation in 10 years from now.
Exactly.
All right. So one of the next questions I had for you, and we are a coastal community. Does the Coast Guard qualify? I noticed you said the National Guard earlier.
Absolutely. Our coasties are qualified. I actually have a couple of Coast Guard clients right now, and they are absolutely eligible for the VA home loan.
So you Coast Guard guys out there that didn't think you qualify or didn't know you qualify, feel free to reach out to Patrick or I. Would love to help you get going on the process. For a home seller that gets an offer in and they're looking at a VA approval, what should they be asking their agent about that VA approval?
Well, like with any loan product, any pre-approval letter that comes in, I say the pre-approval is only as good as the loan officer that issued it. So as a home seller and as a real estate agent representing that seller, you absolutely need to vet that letter. You need to call that loan officer, make sure that, number one, they're local, okay, that they understand what nuances are in the local community. Number two, especially if it's a VA offer, that they understand the VA loan program. So one of the things that I see happen so often that is such a disservice to our veteran community is that the lender will wait until much later in the process, close to the closing table, to order the certificate of eligibility, the COE. So the COE is, the holy grail when it comes to VA mortgage financing. It's a document that's issued by the Department of Veterans Affairs, the VA, that clearly defines whether or not that veteran is actually eligible for a VA loan. And I see it happen so many times by, some of the national lenders that say that they support veterans and they have, veteran type terminology in the name of their company. And it turns out that that veteran doesn't quite meet the eligibility requirements. They don't have enough time of service. Everybody just assumed that they did and waited till the last minute to order that certificate of eligibility, where really when you're meeting with a veteran, putting together home financing, that should be one of the first things that you do to right up front determine whether or not they are eligible for that VA loan. So if you are a real estate agent and you're representing a seller, an offer comes in with VA financing, you need to quiz that loan officer. You need to make sure that they have in their hand their certificate of eligibility, the COE. And it is not out of line for a real estate agent to ask a loan officer that. You're not divulging any personal information of the client. It's a simple yes or no. Do you have that COE?
So it seems like that one's almost double-pronged, that COE there that you were mentioning. Both the buyer with the VA loan and the seller really ultimately should be asking for it. And the buyer is almost better off to ask for it before even putting in the offer so that they're ready for that question.
100%.
And at the end of the day, the reality is no matter what offer you receive as a seller, you want your agent to reach out to that lender and confirm the offer, whether it be that it's a standard conventional loan or an FHA or a VA. You want to confirm that they have a real touch with their client and they know what's going on in their life, and that it wasn't a pre-approval given somewhere in the realm of 45 days ago and conditions have changed and things have changed.
Exactly. And I see so many people now that will go to the online services and they think it's as easy as, pushing a button and getting a mortgage, where they'll enter in some data and they'll get a pre-approval or pre-qualification certificate back, but none of that data has been verified, hasn't been vetted, hasn't been reviewed by a flesh and blood loan officer, and it's just, there's no other way to say it. It's a bogus letter, So that's why in my practice, we never issue a letter until we've reviewed the income, the assets, the credit. And in the case of a VA buyer, we have the certificate of eligibility in hand.
So I think you've made it clear to both me and the listeners that you definitely understand VA loans and everything. Could you give me your phone number one more time so that they can get in touch with you?
Sure, absolutely. So the best way to reach me is always my cell phone. That number is 781-888-5678.
All right. Thank you so much for joining me here today at the office, Patrick. I'm going to keep everybody available. If anyone has any questions, comments, or concerns, you can email them to me. You can call me, or you can reach out to Patrick direct. If you don't reach out to Patrick, I can help you get them answered. Thanks for following us this week. We look forward to talking to you next week, and have a great week, everybody.